So I'd love to invite my colleague Eithne to come up on stage. How are you, Eithne?
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So
what a great panel.
What a
His
great...
Excellency Al Swahab, full of energy always,
I know,
isn't he?
exactly.
Really inspiring.
What have you taken away from this event so far, the last day and a half?
I think something that's becoming so clear, and I think we maybe were struggling when we started this, was the fact that everything that's going on is actually the capability to change it is in our hands.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we didn't start from there. And sadly, I mean, I've learned a lot. It's a bit of a culture shock, so to speak, and I've been dragged back a little bit and go, oh, wow, I never thought of that.
It's a lot of personal moments, I think, for me. One of the things that I learned was from Laura's session about thinking about who you follow on Twitter determines your future thoughts. I then went on stage, and I then went on Twitter, and the first thing that popped up was a dog video.
It's okay. Momo is chasing cats. So I think dogs and cats are allowed. They're good.
Great. I mean, it's one of the things I can relate to with my kids. I've got 3 kids, and in fact, that's one of the things that we relate to, is the things we share on social media, and you've got a panel coming up on this exact subject.
Absolutely. This time we're really going to be taking a look at the impact, on children, on tweens and teens, and even younger children. And, what's going on out there, part of it's scary, but I think there's some tremendous people, organizations that have put so much time and effort and energy together to really address this issue, this problem, and to make sure that hopefully they'll correct it now and make sure that we've got a healthier future, a healthier digital future for everybody. That's what we're looking for. Fantastic.
Well, Eithne, I'll let you get on with your panel.
Super. Great to see you as always. Yes.
Thank
you so much. And once again, as I say, this time creating a safe cyberspace for children and teens. I have a tremendous panel here, and there's so many organizations around the world that are really beginning to look at this, and I think well done again to ETreanor to make sure that we've brought all of these great people together. So let me bring my panel in. I believe they're waiting in the wings here. They'll come and join us in a moment. We have the CEO of the Organization of Social Media in the US, Mark Bergman, joins us. Mark, please. Come on. It's not quite afternoon yet. Get the cheer up for Mark. Here we are. Gardner is with us. Will is the CEO of Childnet International and the director of US Safer Internet Center. Kyung-Sung Kim has joined us from Blue Tree Foundation in South Korea. And Liz Sweigart. Liz is, of course, Dr. Liz Sweigart, the Chief Product and Strategy Officer with Safe Kids in the US. So they've all done a tremendous amount of work, and I'm really, really excited to get talking to them and see what's happening and indeed how they can actually perhaps help us. And Mark, I suppose, if we were to just get started, and a lot of what I'm hearing, I have to be just very honest, I'm worried, and we look at all of what's going on out there. The young are a lot more vulnerable, of course. How scared should we be, and how scared, as parents and educators, should we be? Because you lot know what's going on, and you're taking action, which is great. A lot of other people don't.
Yeah, I would say that we need to be aware. So the objective here is not to instill fear. The objective is to have a strictly evidence-based conversation about the dangers that are harming children so that we can all work together to better protect them. Now, the Organization for Social Media Safety is set up to identify current and emerging dangers that are caused or exacerbated by social media use. And then, of course, we work to mitigate them. We believe that when we're having this conversation about safety as a foundational matter, we need to intentionally and specifically identify the full spectrum of harms that are impacting children. So the Organization for Social Media Safety began because of a social media-related danger that had been growing exponentially since the birth of major social media around 2006. No one had identified it, no one was working to protect children against it, and that's social media-motivated violence, or attacks committed with the intention of filming, posting on social media to gain likes and shares and views, or as American teens would say, clout. This happened to my co-founder's son when he was 14, And that's why we began to identify it. So I think it's important when we have this conversation to explicitly mention the full range of harms. I want to mention a few, then I'll pause here. But we're talking about cyberbullying, we're talking about hate speech, extremism, educational deficits, sleep disturbances, predation, human trafficking, sexual harassment, substance abuse, drug dealing, mental health impacts like depression, self-harm, cyber self-harm, suicide, eating disorders, body dysmorphia. I'm going to stop there because it's a long list. But my takeaway is that there is a long list of social media-related dangers that are impacting our children. And while we need research to clarify the scope and the severity of some of these, we know in the here and now that many children are being harmed, some even fatally, because of social media use.
And it's just shocking when you see what's going on and you see, yes, you know, we don't hear about everything, but the ones that we do hear about, and we probably need, you know, general media to be looking at this maybe a little bit more in depth. So again, what Eithne is doing is great here. Will, talk to us about the situation in the UK particularly. I mean, Childnet International really, you know, looking wider than that, of course, but in UK, and again, very, very active social media population. I mean, active in the world generally now.
Absolutely, and we're working with kids as young as 3 up until 18, so this is something we need to start early. It's one of the messages I want to give. I was running a panel with some young people at an event not quite at the scale of this one, but there was a 17, 18-year-old who said, when I was 11, this was a few years ago, when I was 11, I was using Facebook and such and such. When my brother was 11, he wasn't using that. And then he went on to say, so kids from that generation, and he had kind of put a new generation of change just in relation to the speed of technology that was there. So I think the message is this is a very fast-moving environment. It's important for us to keep pace and make sure that we are ready to support children, young people, and those that surround them with the policy to be able to make good decisions, effectively trying to give young people a benchmark to try and make good decisions. The issues that Mark outlined are absolutely right, and I think the message I want to give to that is that young people do really care about this. You know, we did a study focused on online hate in the UK for teenagers. 80% of teenagers said they have experienced online hate or seen online hate. And 63% said they were worried about that, and that had an impact on their life. And I think there is kind of freedom of speech movements around the place, but clearly what happens online can actually silence some people, particularly some people in the community online.
Yeah, and it's probably sometimes something that a lot of kids don't want to talk up about, and you know that's the downside of it. You know, Mr. Kim, when we look at the Blue Tree Foundation, you know, it's been around for 27 years really, and it's about preventing school violence, and really it's all about child protection. But you do more now than deliver counseling. You know, what are you specifically focused on? What are the issues now?
Yeah, of course. We did much more things for the prevention of school violence last 27 years. The founder's son died because of school violence in 1995. And the accident urged his life to devote the organization of the prevention of school violence. In 1995, at the time of beginning of BTF, even government was extremely negative to use the terminology school violence because they strongly believe that there was no school violence in Korea. So, in order to publicize, we held lots of the public campaign, but that was not enough to have the public attention. That's why from the 2001, we did the national research, the national survey, and then we found out that more than 20% of the students, they experience about the school violence. And then based upon this kind of the result, that we persuade the congressman to make some law. So from the foundation, we started to make a law. And then after that, we only, last 27 years, we focused on the prevention of the school violence. Now is the prevention of cyberbullying. So now we are operating 15, the Center for Youth, and then there's several different kinds of the CSR project. Now is the 350 employees, and then every year we use the $22 million.
Okay, I mean, well done. You know, you've been doing this a while, and I mean, it's shifted your focus to Liz at Safe Kids AI. I mean, I love the work that you're doing, and the passion that you bring to it too. You know, but you say bullying in schools is really, it's on the increase, and particularly, I think, cyberbullying. How is the social media affecting, I suppose, the minds of young people? And I mean, what's the damage? Because it is damage, isn't it?
It is damage, and we heard from Mark, the litany of damage. I think Will said something very important around decision making. So we are seeing the spillover into the public. We're seeing this online behavior coming into real life, the TikTok challenges. 2019 study told us that kids who view this violent online content on social media are up to 3 times more likely to perpetrate it in real life. Why? One of the most powerful ways human beings learn is social learning. We learn by watching others and mimicking. So how do we intervene in this? We intervene by making authentic human connections. We intervene by helping young people to understand what they're seeing, process the information, and as Will said, make better decisions that they feel empowered to make.
If you were to, sort of analyze, we were talking about this, and it's great to have this public forum, Mark, but, are the right people coming to the table right now around the world on this? Are these conversations been had, in terms of, yes, the youth, the parents, the educators? I mean, who's having the conversations, and are they having the right ones?
I would say no, this conference aside, which is fantastic, but generally no, because the awareness about these dangers is simply insufficient at this point. We've seen, growing awareness about some of them, but generally it's insufficient. We're having these conversations in the halls of Congress. Every time I'm speaking to a member of Congress or a staffer, they're surprised when we mention a certain danger. One big problem is one of the biggest stakeholders here are parents. And they do have a seat at the table, but they're handcuffed. And this is an issue that we call a lose-lose situation that parents are facing right now. Because social media is a social medium, and it's a big problem. So what happens, and I think this is a global phenomenon, but what happens is you have maybe 2 10-year-olds in a given class, so that's 4th grade in the United States. They get on a social media platform that is clearly unsafe given their developmental age, say Snapchat, and pretty soon you have the entire class on that platform. Why? Because this is how social media and these platforms are how these children are cultivating their friendships, their relationships, building new friendships. So as a parent, if you want to decide that this platform is not safe for your child and pull your child off the platform or prevent them from going on the platform, you're facing this really devastating and very real trade-off of social detriment to your child. They're not able to participate, they're not able to grow these relationships. And so parents are handcuffed when they have this conversation. It's far more complicated than throwing around words like personal responsibility, parental choice. This is not denying your child a candy bar. It's complicated, and parents really are suffering because of it, and of course our children as well.
And the downside, I mean, there's almost a double-edged sword there, because of course you want to protect them from the maladies of what's happening on Snapchat or wherever. But if they're not in the mix, then they're going to get bullied almost because they're not the cool kids, because they can't be part of this.
Exactly. Bullied, they have a sense of relative deprivation, so they get depressed as well. So there's harm on both sides of the equation, and we really think we need to take a community-wide approach to help overcome this problem.
Well, I mean, you're working with a lot of different organizations, technology companies, governments, charities, schools, all of that, again, about having this conversation here. But any sort of case studies that can bring it alive and, demonstrate just how bad it is? Maybe there's good ones too, but I mean, just give us a feel.
I think to give a kind of a positive note, using those different organizations, I think there's absolutely a sweet spot in all of those things you listed, government, industry, charities, police, where this is an issue which is of importance. It's actually relevant to organizations beyond tech companies. It's relevant for those people who have employees, many of whom are parents. And we organize something called Safer Internet Day in the UK, and our job is to try and make it as easy as possible for people to use this moment in time to talk loudly about this issue. And there is a really great response because lots of people and organizations are worried about this. And this year we've celebrated in February, we reached over half of children and young people aged 8 to 17. So it's huge response and impact. And it's kind of mobilizing that collective desire to do something positive in this particular area. I think another thing, just to quickly mention, is the power of young people's voice in this conversation. And that's something that in the work that we do, we're most proud of, where we are young people feel passionately about this as a subject. And if we can give them the tools, we can give them agency to make a difference in their school communities and beyond. And I think if we have a fast-moving environment that I was explaining to you before, I think it's really important we mobilize that voice. I think it's a uniquely powerful voice, and it's something which I think is a relatively untapped resource at the moment.
And again, I think it is part and parcel of making sure that people are engaged probably much younger than we might have thought even 5 years ago, because they're on those devices at a very, very young age. And again, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. I had a young person on my panel yesterday who, also just said, but you guys have to back off. This is censorship, and this is legislation that we don't need, and this is not why, social media was actually put in place in the first place. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about, I don't know, maybe I might call that naivety. I don't want to upset or insult anybody, but there is a school of thought out there that says, leave it alone. It will figure itself out, which I think we're hearing cases perhaps that's not the case. Mr. Kim, talk to me about, how the situation in Korea has changed over the years. Before it was the bully in the playground, he might go hit somebody. We see it on the screens at the Oscars now, so that hasn't gone away yet. We're still able to sort of, have a physical fight. But that bullying in schools has moved online. It's moved to psychological damage now, has it? What challenges is that presenting to you?
Yeah, the trend of the school violence, then according to our national survey, in 2001, as I told you, 20% of the students experienced the school violence. At that time, there was totally, almost all violence is a physical one. And then, because of the effort of the PTF and some other, the school and community, and then the rate of the school violence has been decreased until 2014. And at the time of the 2014, that's a historical moment. That is, the social media and then the smartphone has come out. That's why from 2014, and then the rate of the school violence could be increased a little bit. So because of the cyberbullying. So now it's about 6% of the students experience about the school violence. But our challenge is, in the physical condition, it is very easy to identify who is the attacker, who is the victim. That's very easy. That's easy to control. But now, the trend has been changed. But in the cyberspace, it is very difficult to identify who is attacker, who is assailant. So it is very difficult. It is very complicated. So in order to clarify this kind of the problem that we have to find out, we have to take the several different kind of the ways. So I'm going to tell you that later detail.
Yeah, I mean, it does need a different approach. And Liz, I mean, I think, we've talked, and you would say that the current system is flawed. So maybe building on what Mr. Kim is talking about, the current system is flawed. It's not working. It needs a radical rethink. What do you say? I mean, where's your advice to say this is where, do we need to just pull back and start it all again? Or, what are the key areas that we really need to be examining?
Well, to pick up on a theme that Mark had, what we have now is perpetuating paranoia and fear on all sides. Our ethos is to block, restrict, and rat them out. Mm-hmm. And that's not creating the environment we need for good decision making. I care about the whole brain. I want a brain-friendly environment for young people to be able to make sense of what they're seeing and make good decisions that will carry them through life, online and in real life. When there is only blocking, restricting, and ratting out, there is no room to make a mistake. Where there is no room to make a mistake in a low-stakes environment and come back, there's no room to grow. There's no room to develop. Gitanjali yesterday talked about the 7-second pause. Pause, reflect, and then redirect your energy to human connection, authentic human connection. The solution here is not to be further buried in technology. The solution is to connect with other human beings because that's what our brains are wired to do. But we can only do that with the opportunity to pause and reflect first. And if we are greeted with a message that says, this page has been blocked, contact your system administrator, that's not happening.
Will, if I can bring you in on that, and I suppose a follow-up to how we deal with it, when you came into, working in this environment, you got in in the mid-90s, so to speak. But sometimes it looks like things have gotten completely out of control. I mean, have we lost control on this, and now we're desperately grappling to come back and say, it has got so bad, we need to be doing something about it, whereby should we have been doing something about it, I don't know, 20 years ago? I guess we weren't informed, and it's hard to make decisions when you don't have the information and the data.
Yeah, so I started at Childnet in the year 2000, and the issues are obviously very different. And the response at the beginning was, well, let's look at self-regulation, and let's encourage industry to take those steps. And I think it is a fast-paced environment, and quite often children and young people are the pioneers within these environments, using technologies which weren't necessarily imagined to be used or to be popular in a particular way. And I think there is a level of exasperation that you can see in different countries around the world where regulation is now seen to be necessary. Regulation is now needed to be necessary for a range of different things around my hope is to bring greater transparency to the decisions and the responses that are happening within the services which are so enormously popular with children and young people. But I think there is not just a narrative of disaster. The young people are using technology in incredibly original ways and we've heard already during the session about voice, expression, activism, and it gives potential to young people who are engaged in the platform. But it can also be a new dimension about friendship. When we talk with young children in schools, we often talk about friendship, but I think there's scope to expand that. What does a good friend online do? How would you, if you want to be a good friend to your friend online, then what would you do in order to support them? If you saw them having a difficult time, you'd send them a message of support. And I think there's tools and things that we need to do to be ready to support even young children within this space.
Liz, if I might bring you in here too, and of course there's there's great creativity that's happening online, but also there's problematic internet use, and it's internet addiction, all of that, and I think we look at that at any age. But what's compounding this at the minute, because it really is leading to a lot of big issues?
Well, first, I have to thank you for using the technical term, problematic internet use.
You educated me on that, so now I know what it is.
That is excessive use of the internet that interferes with daily life. What the research has found is that calling it an addiction is often incredibly unhelpful, but we understand it in our colloquial speech. There is an incredibly high association of that problematic internet use with depression, with anxiety, with attention disorders. What we need to be looking at, I think, are the two conditions that are the precursors to that excessive internet use. The first one is preference for online social interaction. And the pandemic did us no favors here. Using the internet for creativity, for connection, it's good. But if that is the only way you know how to communicate with others, that is a very slippery slope. Because what it leads to is the second piece, using the internet to regulate your mood. I feel bad about myself. I don't talk to my friends, I don't talk to my parents. I post inappropriate pictures of myself online because even though I get negative feedback, it is attention, and that attention is validating. So those two things, the preference for the online social interaction and using the internet to regulate your mood, that is what gets you to that place of problematic internet use.
And Mark, I mean, you talked and you had that long list, looking at, drug dealing online. Seemingly it's a marketplace and it's a very active one. Even human trafficking. I mean, these are really, really extreme that I would think, but, clearly you have the evidence to that. Just perhaps you can share with us, we don't want to shock people too much, but it's not, part of it is not, it's not a nice space out there.
It is not a nice space. So I went over that long list of dangers, and some of those dangers that you just pointed out continue to grow. They're not necessarily extremely common, but they are extremely severe, and they are not particularly rare. We'll say that. Drug dealing is over social media, so social media connected drug dealing is really a threat that emerged over the course of the pandemic. We knew around 2019, and I think this is the US and the UK, about 25% of teens had seen illicit drugs marketed through social media. Our best guess, and we're waiting for research, is that's probably tripled over the course of the pandemic. And so we're working on legislation right now that we really feel is groundbreaking that's called Sammy's Law. Sammy's Law is named after Sammy Chapman, a 16-year-old boy from Los Angeles, California. He was at home like so many children during the pandemic, went on to social media platform Snapchat particularly, connected with a drug dealer in a few minutes, was able to order up prescription drugs, obviously without a prescription. They got delivered to his house like a pizza, essentially, and this is how it works. And unfortunately, those drugs that he ordered were contaminated with an opioid called fentanyl, which is happening increasingly, and he tragically passed away. I'm getting about a call a week from parents where this is happening in the US. So I'll say that it's not rare. And so what Sammy's Law would do, and why we feel that it's so groundbreaking with global implications, is that it would require social media platforms to give parents the choice to use third-party safety software, including like Liz's company and product. And that type of software can help parents monitor for issues like drug abuse, but the full spectrum, for the most part, of the dangers that I spoke about. And so we're really hopeful, this is legislation that's going to be introduced in the United States Congress shortly. We're really hopeful that this is a bill that's going to pass and make a big difference.
And I think when you see that extreme and that shock, particularly, kids who maybe think because it is prescription drugs, they're just dabbling a bit, but actually it's horrific in terms of kind of, the sad results that was. Mr. Kim, in terms of, we look at South Korea, and I mean, I shouldn't necessarily say if it's good or bad in any different city or culture, but, let's perhaps go back to the school situation. That's your focus. And how bad, is that cyberbullying? Perhaps you have a case that maybe you saw resolved. What can you do when situations are there, they're in front of you, and you need to come in and intervene and help?
You mean the CSR program?
No, maybe share with us a case, a memorable case that you think of that that you managed to solve.
I'm gonna take two examples. The one bad example is the last year, one middle school student committed suicide, and then the parent didn't know why he killed himself. So after funeral, and then the parent found the journal, and then inside in the journal they found that he was suffering from the cyberbullying, and then he mentioned about she wants suicide or something like that, and then after the funeral he went to the school, and then the report he investigated the problem, so they found that they already talked to the parent, and then one of the senior talked to his teacher about this problem. But that teacher neglect that kind of the bad problem. So he didn't talk to the homeroom teacher. So that is one of the bad example. The good example is, the other example, they contain how solve the conflict among the victim, assailant, bystander, teacher, parent, and something like that. The last year on elementary school principal, requested the Foundation for Help. A victim's parent of cyberbullying complained and filed complaint about the school's insufficient handling of cyberbullying case. And then we analyzed, and then we did the several things as follows. That is a package. This kind of solution is packaged. So for example, first of all, we sending the professional counselor to consult with the parent of the victim. And the second thing is support the cyberbullying education for all classroom, and sometimes whole school. And then because all classmates is a sort of the bystander, they could be the potential assailant. So number three, intervention to restore relationship between the victim and the class, the victim and the assailant. Number 4, ask the principal to declare a sort of the principal's declaration movement against cyberbullying. And then, if possible, gather together several different kinds of the principal in the community. Then they show up in the communication, broadcasting, and then they show up and they declare about the principal's declaration movement. Our school doesn't have any the cyberbullying or something like that. So, and reconciliation between the school and the victim's parent, and then apology and reconciliation to the victim. And finally, in some situation, we can also provide the financial support for living expenses or the cost for relocation for victim's family. So this kind of a series of action is a package.
Liz, if I might have you follow up just quickly on this. Whose responsibility is it to find the solution? We hear Dr. Kim there talking about, having everybody talking together, which is without a doubt absolutely essential. The internet's not the safest place for kids, clearly, but where's the right balance to keep them away from what's going on there, or to actually, allow them to explore, I suppose, independently, freely? We hear a lot about the rights of the child.
Well, Mr. Kim is spot on in saying it is community. And at the same time, it's also how we provide the access to the internet. Mark alluded to the work that I do in child online safety software. And what I tell people is it's like 10-pin bowling. You can have those bumpers on the side. I can't make sure they bowl a strike, but I can keep them out of the gutter. And the goal here is to provide the freedom, as we heard before, but also the responsibility and the accountability. And to link that to giving tools to parents and educators that allow them to have meaningful conversations. Because we can't just say, set it and forget it with software. It's bringing it together, providing the human interaction and meaningful connection with the education. And when we do that, that is the magic, and we have the evidence to show that. I can tell you that when we piloted at a school, middle school students, 3 weeks in, 43% drop in the number of attempts to go off task or to inappropriate content in school. They just said, tell us, help us understand why. Sometimes you don't need to do something, but you need to know why.
Now, Will, you sit on the board of, Facebook's Safety Advisory Board, Twitter's Trust and Safety Council, the Executive Board of the UK for Internet Safety. All that tech connectivity, this is good. Can tech solve this technically induced problem?
No, it can't solve it, but it has a role to play. It's the message I would give. I think, we'll talk about regulation again in a moment, but I think there's challenges in relation to tech. Parents in general, broadly speaking, don't trust tech to keep their kids safe on tech. And I think that's a challenge we need to overcome. So if tech is going to be part of the solution, it has to come with a level of communication and education around it to try and make sure what the benefits are of it and how it can really provide that added value, but also what its shortcomings are, because most things won't provide the level of safety that people would want it to have. So I think whatever the tech solution is, there has to be the educational engagement and desire for it. But I think in terms of, there is regulation coming, and I think industries do see that coming. I do think that things have improved. There have been some steps in the right direction. You see more privacy by default coming in, so people starting a service there, that they will be private before they make a conscious choice to go more public. It's the beginnings of that movement. It needs to be more widespread. So there are some improvements on that side. But I think the regulation that we're going to have in the UK, it was mentioned yesterday, the hope is that it will effectively get industry providers, and it's really targeted at social media providers, to implement their own terms and conditions. So that's the goal. They have their own rules of the road about what they allow and don't allow, and I think we constantly see content in the news, in the media, about where there have been failings and just inexplicable lapses of, well, why is that content still on? And I think the public confidence in the service rightly drops. So what is the truth? What is happening? What are the decisions being made? And so this legislation is to try and design to try and prevent systemic failure in the systems that industry have. And it makes a duty of care for the provider of the service on their users. So they have a responsibility and a liability in that regard.
Mark, when we look at, I suppose, the risks and the benefits, and also, we look towards the metaverse, which I'm very scared about right now, so I am. But, where are we heading to? It's another unknown. It's there, and we're all slowly moving there. But coming down to, I suppose, the regulations, how do we manage it? What do we do? But again, looking at this risk-reward dilemma.
Yeah, well, the risk-reward is how we measure safety of a product. It's how we've always done it for all sorts of products. And I think this is the question right now for us. And we've noticed that there's an emotional reaction when we're posing the question, do the risks outweigh the benefits for children or children of a certain age? And I would ask everyone out there that we need to be fearless in continuing to ask this question. Not just asking it once, but continuing to ask the question. People assume, and we're talking about kids here, so adults aside, people assume that we have such a high rate of adoption of social media, it's here to stay. So I would ask that people ask the question, do risks outweigh the benefits, and go through 2 steps here. One, as we talked about at the beginning, objectively, in an evidence-based way, analyze and talk about the risks and look at the specific benefits. And then once you do that step, comes the subjective part. Where do we draw the line? How many children harmed is too much? What benefits are so necessary? That's going to be based on individual values and community values. The Organization for Social Media Safety right now does not have a recommended age cutoff for young teens. We would say under 13, we're getting very clear that it's too dangerous of a tool for those children. 13, 14, 15, we are very concerned. As I mentioned, children are being harmed. I've sat with too many parents that have lost children because of social media. So, potentially it's too dangerous a tool for our younger teens as well.
There's so much work to be done on this. We have to start wrapping up. Mr. Kim, if I might start with you, and also maybe combine it with the fact that I know delivering all these services costs money, and I know you're getting support from Samsung. So it's good to see that, the big phone companies are coming on board too. But if you could just, perhaps kind of wrap it up for us and just tell us how important it is to be working with the big corporation and kind of, what's the hope for the future?
Yeah. Among all Korean big companies has a CSR department, and that it's all of the competition among the big company. So, for example, the Samsung has about $660 million for the CSR money. In order to get some fund from the CSR money, and then the procedure is almost the same as the applying for the research fund to the National Science Foundation in the United States. Each of the foundation, each of the organization, they apply with a very special program, and then they provide us the money. Usually, the big company, they don't do anything directly. They just provide the money and they just supervise the program. So, for example, this one, what can you do? Can you realize what is this?
Does he talk?
There's an elephant.
I knew that.
Yeah. No? Yeah. This elephant is the symbol of the Samsung CSR. Oh.
I got him. Can I help you?
He'll keep him comfortable. Don't worry, he'll be fine.
Okay. The Samsung CSR program. The Samsung gave us the 10-year project with the total of $13 million. And then this is a part of the program is only for the prevention of cyberbullying. So, as I told you, 2014, only the trend has been changed to physical violence to the cyberbullying. That's why in Samsung, we got a 10-year project to only prevent the cyberbullying. That the cyberbullying program contained the prevention program and the immediate response program and the healing program. And then some other companies, Kakao. Kakao is the most popular social media company in Korea. The Kakao company, they gave us some money to make the harmonious digital world, to make more the safe cyber world. There's some other company gave us some money.
Yeah.
That is used for emergency dispatch program. If we realize where is the problem, and we can just send. Or so sometimes the principal or some other people ask us to do something, so we dispatch right away. So,
And I think that's so important. Well done, I think, getting the big players like that involved and actually making sure that, and it's great to hear that they want to actually help a company, an organization like yours that's really out there doing it. Liz, we have to wrap this up. In terms of, I suppose, that big call to action and what can we do? Because there's a tremendous urgency around the work that you're doing right now, and you know what needs to be done.
Urgency is the word. Evidence tells us that unlimited surveillance and restriction is demonstrably ineffective. We need to bring solutions that give kids and parents opportunities to pause, reflect, and redirect to authentic human connection. That is our key. And that's why what we're doing here, and I am so thankful to Eithne for creating this opportunity. These connections, this human interaction, what happens here can, and I believe will, change the world for the better when it comes to keeping our kids safe online.
And again, this is just the very start. Will, a quick word from you just to close it up.
Yeah, very quickly, we heard a lot about listening earlier today. I think it's really important that we're all listening to children and young people. I'm a great believer in the power of a young person's voice. Just to give a very short example, when my child or one of my children tells me to stop looking at my mobile phone, I really listen. And I think there's a lot we can do to harness that voice in this work.
And Mark, a closing word from you.
Yes, so thank you so much to Eithne Institute and SYNC for hosting this important conference and leading the change to help keep our children safe online. My closing point would be that we need to realize again that social media is dangerous for our children. The Organization for Social Media Safety works through 3 different departments to make social media safer. That's education, that's advocacy, and that's technology development. And I would urge you all to think that we need all 3 working together to be able to accomplish this task on behalf of our children and help keep them safe.
And we have to leave it at that. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us. Thank you for being with us here too. Okay. So once again, to Mark, Will, Mr. Kim, thank you so much. And to Liz, thank you all so much. And continue with your great work, because I think you are all doing so much, and it's making a big difference, yes, in different countries, in different spaces, with schools. But it needs, I think, that movement that you have started to create, the pressure you can put on regulatory bodies, on legislation, on parents, on families, the educational system, and wake us all up, perhaps, to the dangers that are there so we can make sure we're not talking about them, hopefully, this time next year. Once again, thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it back over